someone is holding two individuals in an undisclosed location. One of them is decked out in military-style garb, while the other sports a plain tracksuit. The man from the military starts talking and apologizes to the professor. This apology gets a rebuke from the professor, who claims he is to blame for everything that went wrong. As he vents his frustrations at the traitorous informant, the soldier begins to reflect on the chain of events that led him to this predicament. He claims the enemy had a considerably larger force than expected, and had meticulously planned their attack timings and routes. It was obvious this was a trap when it started. There are a few clacks coming from outside the door, and it opens soon after. Another soldier, later identified as Sergeant Kim, is tossed into the holding cell by one of the guards. Seeing another soldier treated so badly makes the other soldier very angry, and he or she gets to their feet and starts insulting their captor. The guard then slams the soldier's head with an assault rifle after muttering something in a language we don't understand. This whole ordeal might be taking place in one of the many war-torn countries in Africa, as we see this captor's African heritage. Kim addresses the other soldier as lieutenant and inquires as to his well-being. Kim informs the lieutenant that the other troops were taken somewhere else, and the lieutenant replies that he's fine. One of the guards glances down at them, and then there are more clanks outside the door, and it opens again very quickly. A figure behind him knocks him out at that moment, and he collapses to the ground. Someone wants to know if Lieutenant Kang Ham-chan is around. When the lieutenant hears Korean spoken by an unknown individual, he is taken aback and inquires about his identity. After hearing the stranger claim he is coming to save them, they all start to follow him. The consequences of this stranger's arrival are evident as numerous guards are rendered unconscious. Kang is taken aback. Asking the stranger about his division and the number of people with him, Kong continues. The mysterious individual claims to be alone and unable to divulge this information. Once again, Kong is taken aback by this, wondering how someone could pull this off so stealthily. Out of nowhere, a guard emerges, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon, having noticed their presence. Kong gets ready to fire, but the stranger dashes at the guards, knocks one of them out with 2 quick blows, and then throws a knife at the other, killing him. The stranger has a conversation with the troops, pledging to take care of the enemy while they speed up their pace. Agreeing, Kang expresses his frustration that he is essentially treating them like luggage. Whenever the guards try to stop the stranger, he moves too fast. Beyond the next bend, Kang sees a slew of enemies, and he figures the stranger will need his assistance with the one on the other side. But the stranger keeps on the move and dashes past the guards, killing them one by one in silence. He is obviously not a military man, and Kang is shocked by his callous attitude toward human life, calling him a monster. The stranger instructs them to remain in this area for 1 minute after they reach the outside. Despite Kang's confusion, the stranger's keen observational skills allow him to spot the other soldiers trailing behind them, all of whom are visibly gasping for air. Kang takes note of the stranger's clumsy, but generally good Korean and his black pupils. The stranger remains silent when Kang inquires if he is Korean. After a short while, he announces that their time together is up, and they resume their journey. Is he right? Kang asks himself. Eventually, they reach an open area where the other captured soldiers await them. The fact that they got back together makes everyone happy. When Kang inquires as to their whereabouts, they reveal that the stranger rescued them as well and instructed them to remain in this location. There will be people waiting for them if they go southwest, the stranger says, and this is where they part ways. Kang thanks the stranger, but the stranger says he didn't do anything special. All he did was fulfill a request. Kang extends a handshake, confirming his suspicion that he is a mercenary. He expresses his gratitude regardless of whether it was a request or not. As the mysterious individual examines Kang's hand, an unexpected explosion bursts from the nearby bushes, taking them by surprise. The stranger yells out for everyone to get down just as the explosion is about to happen. Even though the explosion throws Kang for a loop, he pulls through and claims the blast was caused by mortar rounds. The explosion had omitted his people, so he searches for them and discovers that they are unharmed. We witness the stranger retaliating against his assailants as gunfire erupts out of nowhere. The stranger looks exactly like a teenager, which confirms Kang's suspicions that he is relatively young, and Kang is understandably taken aback by this. 6 months down the road, we find ourselves outside a school. In the classroom, a teacher introduces a new student, the mysterious individual who aided the soldiers in their escape to the rest of the class. We learn his name Yu Ijin during his introduction. Inside the school, a girl thinks about her brother. Her train of thought is abruptly interrupted when a young lady enters the classroom and begins yelling about a new student who apparently has a very attractive appearance. The young lady is aware that they are discussing her brother, the brother whom she had never anticipated to be alive because of a plane crash that took place while he was inside an airport. We learn that Yu Ijin is her brother, and she gazes at him with a longing in her eyes. An elderly gentleman is standing next to him, and he is crying while gently touching his face. He is expressing his surprise and happiness that he has returned alive. When the girl sees that, she wonders if it is actually her brother. At this point, Yu Ijin looks at her and gives her a warm smile before stating that she must be Daeun. She is interrupted in her train of thought by a young lady with blonde hair who is irritated with Daeun for ignoring her for such a long time. Later, during physical education, the girl asks Daeun if she brought her gym clothes and demands that she wear them. Daeun claims that she did, but if she were to entrust the girl with them, what would she choose to wear? Daeun is slapped across the head by the girl, who then scoffs at her and calls her insane for talking back to them for interrupting them. Daeun is being bullied by the girl, and she asks her if she would like to be beaten up in front of everyone to the point where she is crying again. This demonstrates that Daeun has been subjected to this bullying for a considerable amount of time. When we return to the classroom that Yu Ijin is currently enrolled in, we find that the instructor is still introducing him to the students. She is explaining that he is currently residing in a different country for personal reasons, and that they should assist him in adjusting to his new life. Every single one of the girls is completely smitten with him. The instructor instructs him to take a seat in a vacant seat, and he complies with the request. A young man named Lee Yi-hyun, who is wearing an orange tracksuit and has red hair, gives him a stern look as he makes his way to his seat. He is perplexed as to why people are fawning over him, and that he appears to be quite feeble. These are some bold statements coming from someone who appears to be attempting to dress up as an Oompa Loompa person. As the guy makes an attempt to humiliate Yu Ijin by attempting to trip him, Yu Ijin immediately recognizes the situation and stops him. The individual is taken aback by this, and he believes that he has timed it out perfectly. He is irritated by Yu Ijin's glare, which he returns. It is at this point that Yu Ijin begins to reflect on the conversation he had with Kang the lieutenant. Kang advised him to refrain from engaging in combat while he was residing in Korea, and Yu Ijin complied with his request. He stated that he would not engage in combat if he did not have sufficient information about the location, and that he had no intention of moving too quickly and risking his life. Yu Ijin claims that he is a professional individual who has spent 10 years on the battlefield, which is a significant amount of time considering his age. Kang interrupts him in the middle of his rant by stating that this is not the reason he is telling him this, but rather for his opponent, expressing his concern for anyone he will be competing against. When the instructor observes that Yu Ijin is standing still, she inquires as to the reason for his lack of movement. After offering his apologies, Yu Ijin continues to make his way to the seat. Out loud, the guy says that Yu Ijin is terrified, but Yu Ijin chooses to ignore him nonetheless. The instructor instructs the student who is sitting next to Yu Ijin to look after him, and we discover that the student's name is Park Youngchin to be more specific. He extends his greetings to Yu Ijin and complies with his request. To Yu Ijin, Youngchin issues a warning about Lee, who attempted to trip him. He warns that you should exercise caution around him and his friend Ju Hyuk Jin, who is currently having a conversation with Lee. Yu Ijin expresses gratitude to him for providing all of the information. It is at this point that the math instructor enters the classroom and introduces the lesson. Some of the people around Yu Ijin are sleeping, others are laughing at something on their phones, and some are outside wearing gym clothes. Yu Ijin takes note of all of these people. While he is looking up into the sky, he reflects on his time spent as a mercenary and gives us a glimpse of the torturous training he endured. He also mentions that this nation is at peace. We see Daeun making her way to the school gates as the school day comes to an end. It is Yu Ijin who is waiting for her, and she notices him. Because of this, she is quite taken aback. Yu Ijin asked her if she would like to go home with him, and she agreed to go with him. As they make their way back, they are surrounded by silence. According to Yu Ijin, this must be a very unfortunate situation. According to Daeun, it is not really that awkward. Rather, it is only a little bit awkward. Yu Ijin expresses this sentiment, stating that there is no reason to be so flustered, and he agrees with him. At the time of the incident, Yu Ijin was only 9 years old, which means that he has very few memories of Daeun or their grandfather after the event. Given that she was only 7 years old at the time, he believes that it must have been even more difficult for her. As a result, Yu Ijin is 19 years old, while Daeun is 17 years old. After a period of time spent walking in silence, Daeun was eventually discovered by one of the girls who was harassing her. When Daeun is considering what she ought to do, she begins to feel anxious. The girl makes fun of Daeun by asking who the boy is who is sitting next to her. She then makes fun of her by claiming that the boy must be her boyfriend and that even she can date. The idea is immediately accepted by Daeun, who asserts that it is her brother. This concept comes as a surprise to the young lady. When Yuijin inquires as to whether or not she is a friend, Daeun confidently responds that she is. The girl becomes irritated by this, and she inquires of Daeun whether or not she is her friend. The young lady inquires once more from Daeun, who is visibly shaking. Yuijin is staring at the group, and one of them is getting up from his seat because he is getting angry at him for staring at them. The other person inquires as to whether or not he is completely insane. It is Yuijin's opinion that they are trying to start a fight. As they approach, one of them makes a slow approach and proclaims that you encounter people of all kinds out here. In front of Yuijin, he stands tall and asserts that he is merely attempting to maintain his composure in the presence of his sister. As Yuijin takes note of all his errors, he is under the impression that he is closing in on him like it is nothing, despite the fact that his vulnerable areas are exposed, and he does not possess a weapon. He is perplexed by his self-assurance, and he recalls the words of Kong, which caused him to make the decision to leave this individual alone. As the guy becomes increasingly frustrated with Yuijin's disregard for him, he grabs him by the shirt and gets ready to slap him. It is at this point that Daeun apologizes, stating that he has been living in a foreign country for a considerable amount of time, and that he is not accustomed to the culture. This is met with a rebuke from the individual, who inquires as to what this matters to him. Yuijin looks at his sister, who appears to be in utter disbelief amidst the events that are taking place. A sudden jab from Yuijin causes the guy's hand to drop, and he then drops his backpack on the ground. Daeun is approached by him, and he tells her to remain still for a short while before placing his blazer on her head in a gentle manner. The individual makes an attempt to attack from behind, but he is rendered unconscious with a single punch in a short amount of time. There are two other people who are taken aback by this performance. The fact that Yuijin had to break the promise he made to the lieutenant on the first day of work is a source of frustration for him. At this point, the other guy is visibly sweating and appears to be very perplexed by what has just taken place. In the background, there is a military zone where some individuals are practicing. Kong can be seen having a look at them. During that moment, a soldier approaches him from behind and informs him that today is the day that Yuijin will be attending school. It would appear that they have been educating him for a period of 6 months, and they are hoping that he will adjust well. Kong confidently asserts that he will be fine because, after all, he was the one who trained Yuijin. When the main character knocks out the first guy, the scene cuts to the conflict that he is currently in. A single blow is all it takes to knock the guy out cold. Yuijin makes a hasty dash to the other individual and punches him right in the gut. Not only does this cause him to fall over the small balcony, but it also causes him to lose consciousness instantly. The girl is taken aback by the outcome of the fight, and Yuijin turns his gaze toward her with the intention of killing her. When Daeun removes the blazer that was on her head, she is left wondering what happened to the guys who were trying to start a fight. Yuijin walks right past the girl and towards Daeun, asking her if she was surprised by the fact that they were knocked out cold. He then offers to buy some food for her during this conversation. Daeun reassures him that everything will be fine. We get a glimpse of Yuijin's well-built physique as he suggests that they should go home. His muscles are visible even through his clothing, which is a testament to his impressive physique. Due to the fact that he is being so kind to Daeun, the young lady gives him a brief glance and inquires as to whether or not he is indeed the same individual who rendered two individuals unconscious in a single instant. After they leave, the girl is left bewildered and speechless. He responds in the affirmative when Daeun asks him if he knocked out the individuals who were threatening them while they were walking back. Daeun is of the opinion that staring at people is impolite and could cause them to become angry. Yuijin claims that he is aware of the situation, but he continued to act in this manner because it appeared as though they were causing her problems. When she hears this, she becomes extremely red-faced and irritated. Yuijin is curious as to whether or not it is because of something he has said. Even though he is at home, his grandfather is pleading with him to refrain from doing the dishes and instead sit down and eat some fruit. On the other hand, Yuijin declines, stating that he ought to take a seat while he is doing the dishes. During the time that he is washing the dishes, his grandfather expresses his hope that the food was to his liking and that he prepared the food to the best of his abilities. Yuijin claims that he always takes pleasure in his cooking and that the items he prepares are always delicious. There is no doubt that his grandfather is pleased with the compliment. After that, he inquires about the first day of school and inquires as to whether or not there were any issues. In response to Daeun's question, Yuijin looks back and says that there were none. They all bid each other a good night and then retire to their respective beds. While Yuijin is sitting in his bed, he contemplates the events that have transpired up to this point, including the manner in which his grandfather warmly welcomed him and demonstrated the quantity of food that he had prepared for him. Yuijin has a dream in which he witnesses the events that transpired on the day of the crash, and we get a glimpse of what took place. During the time that the plane was falling to its death, his parents were working to protect him. He snaps out of his sleep, relieved to discover that it was all a dream. As soon as he emerges from his room, he notices that Dayan is preparing him breakfast. It has come to Yuijin's attention that his grandfather has vanished. He was informed by Dayan that he had left for work. For some reason, Yuijin is a little taken aback by the idea. Additionally, Dayan rushes to the door, stating that she must depart earlier than expected. Yuijin takes a look at the food that is currently on the table, which is a plethora of leftovers from the previous evening. It then cuts to the girl who was present during the fight earlier, who is now explaining to the girl who is bullying Dayan, whose name is Heejin, that the individual who knocked out all of her friends was Dayan's brother. The next thing that we see is that after Yuijin and Dayan had left, Heejin happened to walk by the group of bullies and demanded to know what had happened to them. Remembering what Yuijin did and the glare he gave her afterward, the girl asks herself if it would really be okay if they continued to bully Dayan. She is thinking about everything that happened. On the other hand, she gives herself a sense of security by stating that Heejin's brother is the leader of the third-year students. The scene then cuts to Dayan being suddenly smacked across the head, and we see that Heejin is the one who demands that Dayan follow her. After Dayan has completed this task, the scene shifts to the exterior of the school, where Dayan is currently being assaulted. It was Yuijin who had cautioned her against acting out, pointing out that her brother's life would also be exhausting. The implication of this was that her brother was on his way to meet Yoon at that very first moment. Dayan screamed in retaliation, but her outburst was met with a slap from the person who took it. As Heejin watched Dayan get up and run to Ian's class, she became irritated by the screaming that was going on. To her utter dismay, Hyun's brother and his henchmen had already entered the building. Dayan was able to get in touch with her brother before they could take any action, and she did so while yelling for Ian. Her face was red from the slap, and her clothing was smudged when Ian saw her. She was tattered and her clothing was muddy. The look in his eyes was menacing. Hyun's brother laughed and inquired as to whether or not Dayan was concerned about him. Upon emerging from the doorway, Heejin expressed that even she would be concerned if her brother was subjected to physical violence. It is clear from the expression on Yuijin's face that things will not go well for them. A few moments before the incident, we see Lee and Ju Hyuk harassing Young Chan by throwing erasers at him and attempting to hit him in the head with them. In a manner that is rather intimidating, Ju Hyuk asks a fellow student for his eraser, and the student complies. He hits Young Chan in the head with this significantly large eraser, which causes him to feel uneasy about the situation. On the other hand, Lee and Ju Hyuk argue with each other, with Lee claiming that he simply got lucky and that the reason he was successful was simply because he used a large eraser. The larger eraser, which appears to be quite tough, is picked up by him, and he throws it with all of his strength. On the other hand, Yuijin appears in front of the victim and blocks the projectile with his backpack at that precise moment. This is something that has caused them a great deal of annoyance, and once Yuijin has sat down, they intend to call him after school in order to get him to stop being so annoying. When Yuijin inquires about Young Chan's well-being, he reluctantly responds with a positive response. At the same time, Yuijin observes the bullies looking at him and laughing. After school, Young Chan inquires of Yuijin whether he has any plans for the evening. In that case, he is able to show him around. Yuijin declines, stating that he is obligated to accompany his sister back to their home today. This idea piques Young Chan's interest, and he poses the question of whether or not they move together. Young Chan inquires about her name after Yuijin reveals that she had already begun attending school. He immediately goes into a state of panic upon hearing the name Dayan, and with a sad expression on his face, he explains to Yuijin that his sister's school life is quite challenging. He explains that his sister has been quite popular with the boys ever since she was in middle school due to the fact that she is pretty, and there was a girl who had a crush on more than one of the boys. It was through this that they began to harass Dayan. The fact that people would just let this happen is something that Yuijin finds surprising, but Young Chan explains that it is due to the fact that the girl's older brother is Kim Kisu, who is the most popular student in the third year's class 3. Young Chan continues by stating that the harassment became even more severe because she was in the same class as the primary bully when they started school. The harassment became so severe that people were surprised that she was still attending school throughout the entire school year. Yuijin makes an effort to comprehend everything that is going on, realizing that it is quite absurd that she would bully Dayan for such an absurd reason. As Young Chan puts it, once you discover the truth, there is nothing remarkable about it. They don't require any particular justification in order to bully others. Yuijin recalls the conversation that he and his grandpa had with Dayan, during which his grandfather inquired about how her academic life is going. There is a hint of melancholy on Dayan's face, and she is obviously lying when she says that it is. Yuijin expresses gratitude to him for the information, and at that moment, a large man, the same individual that Yuijin had previously assaulted at the store, knocks down the door of the classroom while a group of other individuals follow behind him. Kim Kisu responds to Ju Hayek's question by stating that there is something that he desires despite the fact that Ju Hayek has asked what they are doing here. The group is taken aback by the fact that he is present. When Kim's goons point him in the direction of Yuijin reprimands them for losing to such a guy, pointing out that he appears to be quite fragile. Yuijin responds to his call to stand up by standing up himself. Yuijin inquires as to whether or not he is Kim, and he is taken aback by the fact that he already knows his name. Kim is irritated by Yuijin's looks at him, and as a result, he gives an order to one of his goons to bring him over here. During the time that the thugs are approaching Yuijin, his sister suddenly bursts in, covered in bruises and filth. Yuijin takes in the scene, and his eyes lose their warmth as he does so. It has been stated by Kim Kisu that he is quite envious. It's wonderful to have a sister like Yuijin. All of a sudden, Heejin responds by saying that she too would be concerned if her brother was about to be the victim of physical abuse. Dayan breaks down in tears as she expresses her regret to Yuijin after observing the large number of individuals who are pursuing him. According to Yuijin, there is no requirement to offer an apology. Suddenly, Yuijin delivers a right hook to the individual in front of him, which causes him to lose consciousness and pass out. Dayan is given the assurance that none of this is her fault by him. Another goon makes an attempt to punch Ijin, but it is unsuccessful. His punch is redirected by Ijin, who hits his exposed windpipe this time. Instantaneously, the scoundrel falls to his knees, and it is clear that he is having difficulty breathing. Ijin is being attacked by one of the remaining goons, who is in a state of panic. This, however, is a disaster for him because he is extremely vulnerable. Ijin delivers a kidney shot, which lands correctly and causes the opponent to fall to the ground. At this result, everyone, including Kim, is left in a state of shock. Ijin gives the brother and sister, who are shaken by this, a glare to show his disapproval. Ijin is familiar with a few tricks according to Kim. Kim makes an attempt to strike Ijin in the neck with his leg, completely ignoring him in the process. His illusions dissipate as he realizes that Ijin has successfully blocked the attack, despite the fact that he initially believed that he had caught him. Kim loses her composure and launches yet another assault on the opposing side. Kim is thrown to the ground after Ijin easily blocks this one. He then grabs Kim's leg and punches him directly in the face, rendering him unconscious. Ijin gives him a mean look with the intention of killing him, and then he delivers the final blow that knocks Kim out. Everyone was taken aback by his ability to triumph over Kim. Ju Hayek and Lee are even more similar to this. He walks up to Han while clenching his fist and making his way toward him. At that moment, Dunn intervenes and tells Han that he has had enough of hitting her. Han is certain that he will hit her. This notion is refuted by Dayan, who asks whether or not these individuals are not the same individuals who bullied her. She tells him that everything is fine now and that he ought to stop. Ijin complies with her request and offers to ride her back to school. At the moment, Kim's sister is fuming in the classroom because she has witnessed her brother and his friends being assaulted. While he is walking, Dunn makes the observation that Ijin is quite skilled in combat. He also apologizes once more, stating that it is because of her that he has been involved in fights for the past 2 days in a row. Ijin claims that he would gladly fight for her, stating that from the place where he used to live, people would only think about themselves with their own interests in mind. On the other hand, there were instances in which family members appeared to be involved. After that, there is a flashback. Ijin, in his capacity as a mercenary, couldn't help but wonder what exactly a family was when he saw a man shielding his daughter from his assaults. With the knowledge that he hardly remembers her and Grandpa, Dayan wonders how this could possibly be the case. Although he acknowledges that she is correct, he is certain that they are related to one another. After experiencing a sense of embarrassment, Dayan informs Ijin that she will be walking the remaining distance by herself. They are already in front of her class when Ijin inquires as to why they are there. Her shyness is reflected in Ijin's smile as she waves goodbye. He has returned to the classroom. Lee and Ju Hayek offer their congratulations to him on his victory, with Ju Hayek remarking that it appeared as though he was mocking the situation. Even though he is sitting in his seat, Young Chan says in a timid manner that he thinks Ijin also looks cool. In a different location, Kim and his goons express their despair over the events that transpired, with Kim pointing out that Ijin is in an entirely different league. His sister continues to criticize him, wondering how they could have been defeated by a single individual. Kim tells her to be quiet because she has had enough of her babbling by this point. Despite the fact that she did not back down at all, Kim gave her one last menacing glare, which caused her to become so enraged that a tear formed in her eye. She then left, slamming the door behind her. She then returns to the classroom, where she makes a mocking statement to Daeon, telling her that from this point forward, her life will be simple because she can depend on her brother for anything. Daeon's callous disregard for Heejin is a source of intense rage for her. As she says that there is no way that she would ever do something like that, she wonders if she will just have to watch Daeon quietly from this point forward. While walking to the school gate, Daeon is thinking about her brother, who has been there to protect her, but she is also thinking about the bullying she has experienced up until this point, and she is wondering if it is truly over. She is so preoccupied with her thoughts that she walks right by Yoo Ijin without noticing him. He inquires as to whether or not she is thinking about something. Despite her apology, he does not seem to be bothered by her failure to notice him. In light of the fact that their grandfather enjoys having dinner ready for him when he returns home, Daeon suggests that they make a trip to the store to pick up some materials. It is obvious that Han is plotting something behind their backs as he glares and smiles in a sinister manner. When Daeon is inside the shop, she notices that Ijin is quite popular based solely on his appearance, as there are a couple of girls who are talking about him. She asks him if he has ever had a girlfriend before, and he responds that he has never had a girlfriend before. Considering how well liked he is in this location, Daeon is taken aback by the fact that he must have also been present. Ijin gives the ground a brief glance before responding that he was simply preoccupied with other things. He poses the same question to her, and she responds with the same response that he did. Upon entering the apartment, Ijin's grandfather presents him with a phone, which appears to be the most recent model. The grandpa explains that in order to enter the phone numbers, he had to remove the phone from its packaging. He hopes that Ijin will not be upset about this. Also, he promises that once he has enough money, he will purchase a phone for Daeon as well. This idea is refuted by Daeon, who asserts that the one she is currently using is functioning perfectly. During the course of their conversation, Ijin expresses his gratitude to his grandfather, who is overjoyed by Ijin's expression of gratitude. Within the confines of his bedroom, he beams with delight at his new acquisition and sends a text message to the lieutenant, who is perplexed as to why Ijin has a new phone given that he has already purchased him an expensive alternative. When he is making his way out of the bathroom after taking a shower in the morning, he notices Daeon rushing toward the door and stating that she is running delayed. Additionally, she cooked a meal for him. While she is running, she assures herself that she will arrive on time. Upon further investigation, we discover the reason for her tardiness, which is that Grandpa enjoyed the soup so much that she made it again in the morning. She was thinking about how much her grandfather appreciated her when all of a sudden she was kicked to the ground by a group of thugs who were all female. "You should keep an eye on where she is going," says one of them. Although Daeon expresses regret, she is immediately slapped. There is consensus among them that they should go to karaoke, which was suggested by one of them. At that moment, one of them gets down on Daeon's level and says that she must also come. Based on Daeon's observations and the fact that she has blonde hair, it appears that this is Heejin. It is only the three of them who emerge from the karaoke establishment after they have gone inside. After they have finished singing, the worker remarks on how loudly they were screaming inside, stating that they must have a lot of energy because of how loud they were screaming. It comes as a shock to him when he opens the booth that they were in and discovers Daeon lying on the ground, having been beaten to a pulp. Despite the fact that she is on her last legs, she pushes herself to her feet and refuses to call 911. There is a teacher who takes attendance at school, and Daeon is not present. As Han understands the reason why she is not in class, she smiles at this. When one of her lackeys inquires about whether or not they will be okay, she tells them to stop worrying because they had nothing to do with it, and she is almost certain that Ijin will not find out about it. He waits for her outside the school gate, and when he realizes that she is not going to come, he calls her immediately. She does not answer his call because Daeon is curled up inside her sheets, most likely crying. He calls her, but she does not respond. When Ijin gets home, she takes note of her shoes. With a knock on the door, he goes to her residence. The fact that she responds to his inquiries with a voice that is raspy is something that he also notices. A sick excuse is offered by Daeon as an explanation. Ijin, who is not going to pursue this matter any further, notices her shoes once more as he is returning, but this time he notices that there is blood on them. His eyes become icy once more as a result of the occurrence. The scene then shifts to Yu Ijin tending to Daeun's wounds, most likely after breaking into her room out of concern. When asked about what took place, she tells a lie, claiming that she was attempting to avoid a bike and fell down some stairs, which is how she sustained her injuries. Yu Ijin inquires as to whether or not she would like to go to the hospital, but she declined the invitation because she is aware that they will discover that the stairs were not the cause of this. During this portion of her history, which most likely takes place when the bullying first started, Daeun makes an attempt to place blame on Heejin for her injuries by claiming that she bullies her on a regular basis. It would appear that Daeun also called some law enforcement officers to the scene, but her efforts were in vain because Heejin's mother, who is enraged by this, completely disproved her allegations. Daeun is prompted by her mother to contact her parents. Having reached her breaking point, she bursts into tears as a result of this. Despite the fact that Daeun's injuries aren't particularly severe, Yu Ijin observes that she is deeply contemplating the situation and believes that she will have to endure the pain for a few days. Daeun takes note of Yu Ijin's capacity for providing medical care, as well as the fact that their grandfather may not be able to tolerate this due to his heart condition. She is given the assurance by Yu Ijin that he will speak to him. As Daeun is leaving her room, she stops him to express her gratitude. She is under the impression that it was a wise choice to keep Yu Ijin in the dark about what actually took place. Students like them are unable to accomplish anything. When Yu Ijin is outside of her room, she is surrounded by a terrifying red aura that is located inside of a club. While he is still covered in bruises, Kim Kisu discusses the situation with his subordinates. It is stated by one of them that they are unable to let this go, and that they were not adequately prepared. Kim Kisu makes the suggestion that they do not have to engage in a one-on-one fight because they are not martial artists, and all of them smile in agreement with her declaration. There is a phone call from his sister, who informs him about what she has done. It comes as a surprise to Kim Kisu, but she is also very pleased about it. She stated that they had been planning to do something to Ju along with it. A figure emerges from the shadows, and it is Yu Ijin who is the figure in question. Kim Kisu is taken aback by his presence, and he has stated that having a revenge match was something he had always wanted to do. Yu Ijin grabs the head of a goon and slams him into the ground, preventing him from finishing his sentence. He is unable to finish his sentence. Instead of swinging, another fighter receives a left hook, which causes him to lose consciousness. Every single one of them makes an attempt to rush him, and one of them is kicked and thrown against the wall. After moving on to his next target, he suddenly notices that one of them has appeared behind him with a bottle, giving the impression that they have taken him by surprise. On the other hand, he is quick to respond, as he quickly disarms one of them and knocks out both of his people who are attacking him. On the very last one, he takes care of it. Kim Kisu, who is once again astonished by his combat abilities, notices Yu Ijin giving him a glare. In light of the fact that this is the first time he appears to be truly angry, he gives Kim Kisu one final warning that they should not mess with his sister. Kim Kisu is trembling as he contemplates the combat skills of his adversary and ponders the question of how he could overcome such a formidable opponent. In an attempt to avoid hitting Yu Ijin, he grabs an empty glass and throws it. Quickly, he grabs a bottle and launches an assault on Yu Ijin, who quickly dispatches him in a short amount of time. While he is in a state of hysteria, he breaks the bottle and makes an attempt to snare Yu Ijin without feeling even the slightest bit of fear. With lightning speed, Yu Ijin grabs Kim Kisu by the neck and chokes him in an effort to render him incapable of functioning. Kim Kisu is threatened by Yu Ijin, who makes it clear that this is his last warning, and that he will do unimaginable things to them if he does not comply with his demands. There is a hint of red that appears in his eyes. As he slowly walks out of the bar, he releases his grip on Kim Kisu, and the customers are stunned by this display of behavior. Heejin is seen rushing to the entrance of the bar as she is outside the establishment, wondering what could have happened to her brother that would cause him to end the call so suddenly. As she watches Yu Ijin slowly ascend the stairs leading up to the bar, she is understandably terrified. As a result of her fear, Heejin retreats, causing her to trip and dislocate her hand. Suddenly, Yu Ijin receives a phone call from his grandfather, and he decides to leave. She walks into the bar, taken aback by the events that transpired with her brother. In response to Heejin's continued criticism of Kim Kisu emphasizes that they should refrain from pursuing his sister any further. However, she does not pay attention to his warnings. As soon as the dam bursts, he lets out a shout and addresses Heejin by her full name. He declares that he will beat her instead of Yu Ijin's sister if she ever tries to touch her again. She is shocked, and he is adamant about this happening. Yu Ijin and his grandfather are both seated on a bench outside when they meet for a conference. They discuss the events that transpired with Daeon, with him stating that it was challenging to bring up Daeon because he had never had a girl before, and that he has not done enough for her. When he thinks back on it, he says that she accomplished a great deal more for him than he did because she assisted him in coping with the death of Yu Ijin's parents. Despite the fact that he expresses his discomfort at the fact that Daeon does not confide in him, Yu Ijin reassures him in a gentle manner that, based on what he witnessed, he loves Daeon, but she also loves him. Suddenly, he feels a wave of relief all over him. According to Yu Ijin, he will keep an eye on her while she is at school. His grandfather claims that Yu Ijin is completely unaware of how content he is with the fact that he is here. Heejin's parents and Kim Ki-soo have a conversation with them while they are inside a hospital. Due to the fact that Kim Ki-soo is a particularly troublesome individual, his father is not surprised to see him in this state. This causes the mother to become enraged, and she does not understand why her husband does not become enraged when he sees their children being hurt. Only the children who are still present in the room are left behind after the parents have said their final goodbyes. It is revealed to us that Heejin was the one who informed her parents about what took place and who was responsible for it. It is unclear to Kim Ki-soo whether Yu Ijin was the one who caused the injury to her arm. Despite the fact that he is obviously lying, Heejin asserts that it was actually him while he is sweating. While he is leaving, Heejin boasts that Yu Ijin should relax because they will show him who he chose to mess with. Therefore, Yu Ijin should take it easy. While they are walking through a hallway, their parents discuss the situation that has arisen. It is stated by the mother that she made contact with the chief. Because of this, he is irritated, and he suggests that they should just leave it to the school. As a result of his carelessness, the mother is once again angry with him, and she has stated that she does not know the kind of man the chief is. In addition to that, it appears that Heejin has been paying attention to this discussion. Outside of a construction site, we come across the chief, who is a man who is quite well built and has a look that is quite gangsterish. The man, who is dressed in a black suit, vents his frustration and wonders why he was drawn into the argument between the children. As Yu Ijin sits in his house, he contemplates the events that have transpired and wonders if this is the final chapter. On the other hand, it would appear that this is not the case, as there are two large men waiting outside of his door. It is clear that the grandpa is perplexed by this. Yu Ijin emerges from his room and informs his grandfather that the individuals in question are people he knows, and that he will be back in a moment. His grandfather is taken aback by this statement. While they are taking him back to the warehouse, one of them informs the chief that he has made the decision to come in a quiet manner. The head of the organization tells them to get it over with as quickly as possible, and one of them grabs a bat while the other one says they should grab his arm. The fact that this is about Kim Ki-soo is communicated to Yu Ijin by one of them, who makes a joke about how Yu Ijin shouldn't have messed with those children. The chief is a little bit irritated by the fact that his subordinates are spilling out information that is not necessary, and he mentions that he will have to discipline him later. He takes a quick glance at Yu Ijin, but he is taken aback to see that Yu Ijin is not displaying any emotion, let alone being scared. Yu Ijin swiftly seizes the arm of one of the subordinates and strikes him, leaving him bewildered despite his initial confusion. Yu Ijin quickly and deftly grabs the bat in his arm and delivers an uppercut to the attacker, causing him to be knocked out with just a few blows. The other one quickly swings for his head, but Yu Ijin is able to stop him immediately. The other one comes to from his state of confusion and grabs Yu Ijin from behind with all of his strength. However, he is also knocked down by two rapid elbow strikes. Taking note of his combat skills, the chief expresses his dismay at the prospect of having to engage in a fight with a person of his age, stating that he cannot be a typical high school student. As he gets closer to Yu Ijin, he observes that he is brimming with opportunities, but it is precisely at that moment that he strikes. Having been taken aback by his speed, he manages to avoid the majority of his blows and makes an attempt to go in for an attack, but the chief moves quick. While attempting to block a blow, Yu Ijin is forced to retreat. Once more, the chief inquires about his identity. In response, Yu Ijin expresses that he is merely a typical high school student. The chief makes the observation that he is quite distinct from other street thugs, which offers an explanation for his skill. Yu Ijin takes a stance and the chief rushes him. However, the chief's efforts are fruitless because Yu Ijin only blocks and counterattacks his attacks, which causes him to become incredibly frustrated. He charges a powerful punch, but Yu Ijin, who is looking at him with a knowing expression, deflects it away from him. He delivers a blow to the chief, causing him to fall to the ground. With every fiber of his being, he is convinced that those children and teenagers have messed with the wrong person. The parents of Heejin are currently waiting for the news inside of a building. The mother is taken aback by the length of time that has passed without any new information. When the phone finally rings, the father picks it up and answers it. Despite the fact that he has apologized, the chief tells him that he ought to be apologizing instead because he has been beaten. His wife had sent out such a pointless endeavor. This comes as a complete surprise to the father, who points out that the chief is respected even in the criminal underworld. Yuijin arrives out of the door, much to the family's surprise, as the door slowly opens and reveals herself. We can see that Yuijin has quietly taken care of the guards outside of this room with his presence. Due to the sudden end of the call, the chief is left with the impression that Yuijin has most likely already arrived inside. When Heejin suddenly stands up in shock, her mother lashes out at Yuijin and threatens him. This causes Yuijin to become furious. Soon after, the father silences his wife and engages in conversation with Yuijin, inquiring about the manner in which he arrived. In a mocking tone, Yuijin mentions that there were guards patrolling the area, which prompts him to reflect on what the chief had said and wonder how he could have even discovered this location. After the mother has had enough of this, she decides to call the authorities. When Heejin is ecstatic about the actions of her mother, she considers calling a prosecutor while simultaneously asking Yuijin if he is aware of who he is tampering with. Yuijin gives a response stating that he also does. As a congressman, the father has been elected twice and is currently running for the upcoming election as well. A smirk appears on Heejin's face as he whispers to Yuijin that his life is over. During the time that the mother is conducting a conversation with the congressman, Yuijin takes out his phone and plays a video. In the video, Heejin is seen stealing from a fellow student and engaging in bullying behavior toward another student. When the mother notices this, she immediately hangs up the phone number. Heejin is perplexed as to how he obtained this footage, and it appears that Yuijin obtained it from the surveillance cameras and stored it securely on a memory stick. To no avail, Heejin makes an effort to persuade her father to change his mind about her, as he has had enough of her. Yuijin adds that he also has footage of Kim Kisu, pointing out that the two of them would frequently record themselves engaging in bullying behavior. As a result of the accumulation of footage, the mother criticizes Yuijin, questioning whether or not he believes that these threats will be effective. Yuijin puts an end to her argument by stating that it was not his fault in the first place, and that he had also recorded what had occurred to him at the warehouse itself. Yuijin's father gives in and acknowledges his son's unwavering commitment to his sister. Yuijin rejects his offer to pay for the medical bills and other expenses despite the fact that he claims he will do so. When he inquires as to whether or not he would like his children to apologize, Heejin responds that she would rather keep her mouth shut. However, Yuijin does not accept this offer as well, stating that he desires for Kim Kisu and Heejin to remain out of his sister's sight for an indefinite period of time. There is a great deal of dismay among Heejin and her mother as a result of the defeated father's announcement that he will relocate them overseas. As of tomorrow, Yuijin has expressed his desire for her to leave. When she thinks about it, Heejin instantly starts crying. Yuijin gives the father a glare, his eyes turning a bloody red color, and asks him if he thinks he is an idiot. The father asks for the footage, but Yuijin glares at him. The terrified father expresses his regret. When Yuijin finally makes it home, his family greets him with concern and surprise. They are surprised by his arrival. His grandpa stated that he believed those individuals to be dangerous, and he engages in conversation with them. Daeun goes on to say that they gave off a negative mood. While he is asking how she is doing at the moment, he tells her not to worry and that she should take care of herself. She utters in a feeble voice that she is fine. Yuijin explains to her that she will no longer have to worry about falling down the stairs because he has cleaned it out. She is quite perplexed by this information. The following day, while they are at school, they have a conversation outside of Daeun's classroom. He let her know that he is no longer required to take her because she is almost completely recovered. As soon as she enters the classroom, she is informed that Heejin and her brother will be moving to a different country. Having access to this piece of information has made the other students happy. Daeun recalls what her brother had said, and she immediately returns to the hallway where Yuijin is located. Despite her repeated calls for him, she is unable to utter a single word as she ponders what she could possibly say to him. Her eyes well up with tears as he gives her a knowing smile and a knowing "see you later" as he gives her a gentle smile. Inside of a karaoke establishment, Heejin and her group of friends discuss her and speculate about whether or not she will actually be moving abroad. Eong, who is in the same class as she is on the receiving end of the attention. According to her, it is necessary for it to be the case because Heejin is not reacting to anything. While doing so, Young is filled with fear and wonders if it is because of Yuijin himself. The girls are taken aback when Heejin suddenly enters the room, which leaves them in a state of shock. They ask her if she is really going to move abroad, and she responds that it will only be for 1 semester, noting that she believes her father will take care of everything. Not only does she assert that it is a family matter, but she also states that she cannot say that it is because of Yu Ijin. An individual inquires about Yu Ijin, inquiring as to whether or not her brother has taken care of it. In order to avoid answering the question, she suggests that Daeun be educated the second time around. In addition, she believes that they ought to target her grandfather, and she has stated that she will talk to her mother in order to put him out of work. Someone is speaking from behind them, and a figure in a mask appears, revealing themselves to be Yu Ejin. Heejin stands up and yells his name, but he acts idiotic and claims that he is not the person he claims to be. According to him, they were having a fascinating conversation, and he also mentions that all of the people from the video, which was the video in which Daeun was beaten up, are present. They all stop moving out of fear. Considering that they enjoy making a lot of noise, Yu Ijin inquires as to whether or not they are going to refrain from playing any music, and while doing so, close the door with a malicious intent. While Kim Kisu is being held in the hospital, his parents have a conversation with him and inquire about the whereabouts of Heejin. He claims that she went to say goodbye to her friends, but at that moment, one of the congressman's subordinates opens the television to show something. The gruesome actions of Heejin and Kim are discussed in the news article, and it appears that Yu Ijin was the one who decided to leak the videos, much to the dismay of the parents. As Yu Ijin is standing outside, the chief inquires as to why he would do something like that, pondering whether or not he had a deal. With their parents being politicians, Yu Ijin realizes that he had to find a way to solve this problem in a stealthy manner. In his response, he asserts that he possesses a personality that is twisted. It is a foolish assumption, according to the chief, to believe that the congressman will let this matter go unnoticed. The fact that Yu Ijin has stolen some dirt that the chief had on the congressman, however, means that he will not have time for that now. Multiple instances of solicitation, money laundering, and fraud appear to have been committed by him, according to the evidence. It's a terrible thing that members of his own party are demanding that a comprehensive investigation be conducted. In a state of utter defeat and crushing, he collapses onto a bed. The chief is doubtful that this individual is, in fact, a typical high school student, as he claims to be. While Yu Ijin is at school, the following day he glances out a window. However, all of a sudden, he receives a message from Daeun, in which she informs him that she would be going home by herself today, and that he should go have some fun. He is greeted by Yoongchin, who is curious about what he can do, and he inquires as to if he has anything to do today. He then suggests that they hang out after school. Yu Ijin gives his assent, but at that moment, Lee and Ju Hyuk approach them and inquire as to whether or not Yu Ijin was the one who dispatched the two siblings to a foreign country. Despite the fact that he denies this, they continue to assert that he did, and there are tales going about that Yu Ijin went to Kim's base and eliminated all of them together. They extend an invitation to him to become a member of their group. However, he declines, stating that he is already committed to Yoongchin for the day. He is the focus of their attention, and they look at him in a menacing manner while simultaneously stating that they ought to all hang out together. After that, he reluctantly complies, at the same time wondering if they are going to bully him around again. In addition, Yoon, the instructor, arrives to the classroom with two new pupils, a stunningly beautiful girl and a lovely young man. The girl is named Shin Yuna, and she is the granddaughter of the owner of SW, which is the largest corporation in the country. Next to her is Sukchu, who was constantly with her and was raised to be her secretary and bodyguard. Yoongchin is astonished by their presence, and he reveals that the girl is Shin Yuna, to the dismay of Lee and Ju Hyuk, who are bemoaning the fact that they have to deal with such problematic classmates. The instructor reveals that they have been studying in the United States for a period of 2 years, and that they would be joining the class from this point on. They make their way to their seats, Yu Ijin and Sukchu making eye contact with each other as they do so. Yuna stares at him and asks Sukchu who he is. She is curious about whether or not he is a famous that Sukchu is unfamiliar with, and she makes a promise to check. The two of them immediately meet one another's gazes, and she smiles softly at him as she does so. He does not give it a second's thought before turning his head around, and she continues to sulk at him for doing so. There is a suggestion made by Yoongchin that they should visit a PC cafe. Yu Ijin, recalling his training on such matters, which was evidently directed by the lieutenant, was also informed about Koka, which is also known as coin karaoke. Yu Ijin is seen by Yoongchin to be profoundly contemplating whether or not he is dissatisfied with the things that he has suggested. Yuna finds herself sitting in the classroom and gazing out a window after school has ended. Sukchu shares information with her about Yu Ijin, detailing how he unexpectedly regained his life after such a significant amount of time had passed. He has expressed his suspicions over the fact that it occurred just before they arrived, and he has stated that he will undertake an exhaustive inquiry. Yuijin takes a look at the group chat that they had made with Lee as he makes his way back to his residence. He draws attention to the fact that Yunchin was the one who carried the game that they played. We are brought back to the events that transpired, and it is shown that Yuijin is not very adept when it comes to games. The question of what rank Yunchin holds is posed by Lee and Heejin, who are informed that he is a challenger. They are in a state of shock and are treating him as if he were a god. Yuijin runs across his sister Daeon, who has just emerged from the store, while they are conversing in the group chat. With the explanation that they had to go acquire some garbage bags because they had run out of them, he asked her what she purchased. He offers to carry the suitcase, but she declines, stating that it carries a reasonable amount of weight. Daeon is curious about his day and wants to know where he went from there. In addition to inquiring about her academic performance, he mentions that he visited a personal computer cafe. The fact that she has been able to feel at ease at school for a period of time is something that she claims has been fine. She inquires as to whether he had dinner and reveals that she has not yet eaten because she is always waiting for Grandpa to arrive. He nevertheless accepts the offer despite the fact that he ate with his buddies, and he claims that he only consumed a small amount of food. Daeon's cooking abilities are praised by both of them when they are eating dinner, with their grandfather stating that they are getting better with each passing day. During the time that he is spending with his family, he can't help but reflect on the horrible life that he enjoyed in the past. Even though he is in his room, he receives a phone call from his lieutenant, who inquires about his well-being and inquires about any issues that may be occurring. There is a period of silence from Yu Ejin, which causes the lieutenant to be concerned that he may have been responsible for the death of someone. He is reassured by Yu Ejin, who tells him that the problem was quite minor, but that he resolved it immediately. The lieutenant advises Yu Ejin to get in touch with him in the event that he ever runs into any difficulties. Yunchin had a conversation with Lee and Heejin about Yu Ejin and Sakchu the following day at school. He is curious about who would emerge victorious in a fight between the two. They claim that Sakchu is in a league of his own, since he has reportedly eliminated 30 individuals on his own without suffering any injuries. As a result, they reach the conclusion that Yu Ejin has little chance of winning against Sakchu. They had a face-to-face encounter inside the school, where Sakchu is questioning him about his true existence. There was some friction between Kim and Yuna, but their transfer has nothing to do with him, Yu Ejin says in response to his question about what happened to Kim. There was never a student who was similar to Yu Ejin at the school where he claimed to have been in the past, according to Sakchu, who provides one more piece of useful information.